next car that we have coming up here is a car that probably has, I would say, the worst rollout of any supercar in the history of all supercars. Throughout the 80s, you know, we had a lot of big players come to the game in the supercar hypercar segment, which would have been cars like the 288 GTO, the Porsche 959, the F40, Countach. So many cool, fast, very elaborate looking supercars at the time. Of course, as we've gone into into this generation, those supercars have now become hypercars. The supercars have become kind of a little bit more normal. But this particular car was born out of passion and ended in misery. And I'm talking about none other than the Jaguar XJ220. So where can I start? So many things went wrong with this car. It's pretty comical. So what actually ended up starting as a passion project, 3 or 4 engineers at Jaguar decided, hey, you know, it would be really cool for one of our auto shows to kind of show what we're capable of doing. You know, Jaguar had been involved in Le Mans racing and prototype racing for some time throughout the 80s with moderate success. You know, they certainly knew how to build a race car, and of course, you know, living off the curtails of their 60s and 70s iconic cars, it's a brand that's been around for a long time and a lot of people know. So these engineers decided we want to make something that is along the prototype credentials. We want to fit it with a naturally aspirated V12, and we want to give it all-wheel drive. All this stuff that, well, basically they didn't really know how to do just yet. The V12 was an easy thing because they had been racing with the V12, so it was just a race engine that would be sticking into a normal car. But these engineers got to work. And what they designed was a very sleek, very purpose-built top speed missile. The silhouette of the car would be unveiled, I believe in the late 80s, I believe it was 1988, the British International Motor Show. And the car looked probably really not much different than what you see today. It had a V12 in it, had a Rover engineered 4-wheel drive system, you know, but you can tell that the car was incomplete, with no intentions of actually making this thing either. It was just an expression of passion and design. So the car gets to the show, everybody goes crazy. You know, those individual throttle bodies, stacks coming out of the V12, the long, swooping design lines designed to carve through air. People were leaving deposits, basically telling Jaguar, make this car. So when push came to shove, contracts were built, deposits were taken, and the planned production was 350 cars. As things started rolling out and they started engineering the car to be an actual production vehicle, you know, that's where things kind of changed. The 4-wheel drive system was too complex, too heavy, and too hard to package. The V12, they thought was going to be short on power in order to go for that famed 220 mile per hour, which is what XJ220 actually stands for. So what did they do? They looked at TWR to help them engineer the V6 twin turbo that the car actually ended up coming up with. It went back to a regular 5-speed gearbox with a limited slip differential, and basically everything else was about saving weight. So, as you can see, things are already starting to go down the wrong path. As the engineers went through the car, building it up to what we knew today, in 1991 at the Tokyo Motor Show, the road car was unveiled. And it's the first time people saw it with a 3.5 liter TWR V6. People were less than happy. People were up in arms. You know, big contribution in terms of deposit. And this car was not cheap. This car was $580,000 back in 1993. More expensive than an F40, 959, more expensive than all of them. And of course, in 1992, they went for their top speed run. Now, this is all happening before customers are even getting a car. Martin Brundle took to the wheel, was able to get 212 miles per hour out of it. Just a little bit shy of breaking the record. Now, that version of the car was fully catalyzed. All the emissions control systems were on it. That car was basically homologated for worldwide sales at the time. So what are they gonna do? Well, you know what I mean? We wanna try and get closer to the number. So a lot of cars in Europe at the time, especially throughout the 80s, some of them were sold without catalytic converters at all. Take, for instance, the F40. So Jaguar removed the cats from a particular car. Actually, not one particular car, but pre-production car number 004 had the cats removed from it, slight software tune, bumped the horsepower about 45 horsepower, bringing a combined power up to about 580 from the 541 that the car was introduced with, and went for another top speed run. The car was able to get to 217.2 miles an hour, still short of the 220 in the name, but enough to be the world record holder for almost 2 years until the McLaren F1. So what do we got so far? We got a car that doesn't have the power plant that was expected. We got a car that's very expensive, and we got a car that can't actually do what it says in the name. It's really not working out. As deposit holders started to challenge Jaguar on their deposits, basically saying they wanted their money back, of course, that's when things got really ugly. Jaguar did something that I don't think any other manufacturer would expect anybody to do. They sued their deposit holders. Obviously, there's contract clauses in there that probably stipulated that the car wouldn't be exactly the same, meaning there would be engineering differences, changes to the vehicle to make it production and road ready. What that actually means, well, you know, that's up to the individual to decide. Sales plummeted. So much so that the car was exposed to doing numerous embarrassing things. In a bid to sell some cars, there was a show on ESPN back in 1993 called Fast Masters, where they would take basically a bunch of old race car drivers, put them in these XJ220s, have them race around an oval racetrack somewhere in the southern US, crashing them, smashing them, blowing them up. It was actually embarrassing. From there, many other cars were just basically sitting, well, what they say is a big airplane hangar was just stuffed with them back in England. A worldwide sales associate was going around country to country trying to sell them to whoever would buy them. The very last registered or RDR'd in manufacturer terms, XJ220 went out the door in 1997 at 170,000 pounds. So that's how bad it got. Of course, that was related not just to the car, that was also related to the recession and the times. Take, for instance, the McLaren F1. Planned production of the McLaren F1 was actually 300 cars. They only ended up making 78 road cars. That just goes to show you how tough things were. Now, of course, the F1 was $1 million car. Very, very different situation, but still, they weren't able to execute. None of these cars really get to the planned production. So of the 350 cars they were supposed to make here, they only ended up making 282. Beyond that, the XJs kind of had a rocky life. Of course, them being worth not much in terms of the marketplace. Cars went down, meaning people weren't looking after them. A lot of tired examples kind of all over the world. I would say of the 282, there's maybe probably, I don't know, 250 of them left. And out of that 250, maybe only 200 of them are still a good car, maybe. I'm not quite sure. They've been springing up more and more, as you can kind of see the values are starting to finally go up. My particular reason for investing in the Jaguar is because it's very difficult for me to look at what an F40 is worth today versus a 959 versus a 288 GTO versus a lot of late model Countachs and now even Diablos, and look at this car and not see $1 million car. It did do 217 miles per hour. It does look the part. Start the engine up and the V6 is gnarly. What a sound. The turbocharger's blowing through there. Like, it just absolutely sounds like a missile. Once you get on the highway, accelerate through second gear, the gearing is so tall it just propels you to the top revs. It just propels you, it just keeps continuing to pull this strong, strong power. Really, really, really awesome experience. Very civil too. It actually rides pretty nice despite the fact that this is on a true race car suspension all the way around. Solid bushing car. You know, it's got, you know, all this trick, beautiful pieces underneath, all cast from, you know, forged aluminum. You have these beautiful Aeroblade rear control arms in the rear, which you can see when you have the car up in the air, if you just sort of tuck under the back through the venturis of this diffuser. Basically, all of the design on this car was designed to go top speed. The aero control arms underneath are the most beautiful thing you'll ever see. Most of the aerodynamics of the car are actually, for downforce, are produced from under the car, kind of more like, you know, today's Formula One cars. These massive venturi tunnels here in the rear diffuser, they really, really help to sort of take the air in the front, really, really speed it up and then exhaust it out, creating no pressure underneath so the car can sink down. This is what gave that car very, very good high-speed stability. And if you read a lot of the journalists' words in terms of what the car drove like when it was new, they said it was violently fast, but very controlled at the same time. Especially for a rear-wheel drive car. It really does put the power down. Very little rear tire slip, even under first gear acceleration. It just puts it down and it goes. Back then, 0 to 60 and quarter mile times were basically faster than anything short of, actually, it was the fastest. I think the car clocked a very low 11-second quarter mile time, beating the EB110 at the time, beating any Countach, or sorry, beating any Diablo, and beating any other of the F40 or 959. It's a very, very, very fast car. Today, we find ourselves in a situation where, again, they're starting to creep up in value. And they should. The car's got a remarkable story behind it. It's not just that it's a really cool car. Like, I can't imagine driving down any boulevard and not having everybody go crazy over a car like this. But the credentials are there. And the story is great to talk about. You know, a lot of people have a lot of glamorous collections. But, you know, sometimes it's kind of interesting to go through the duds, you know? If you look at a lot of supercar companies in history, they've all had that one mistake, you know what I mean? Or that one problem that really, really went pretty sour and it was pretty public. And, you know, this is just one of those stories. The example we see here is a 1993 XJ220. And it was originally delivered into Malta back in 1996. So this one sat around for 3 years before it sold retail. It was originally finished in Le Mans Blue over smoked gray interior. The car would be in Malta for most of its life, until finally being imported into the Middle East in the mid-2010s. At that point, the car was battered and bruised. Of course, when investing in a car like this, when thinking about a car like this, it's very easy for any owner to think about, well, who's going to take care of this car? Who's going to maintain it? And we have Don Law to thank for that. Well, Don Law is the gatekeeper of the XJ220. They purchased all the intellectual information. They have all the molds to build body panels. They basically own the XJ220, and they're the preferred service department and caretaker of the XJ220. So this car inevitably went from the Middle East to Don Law XJ220 for restoration. When the car was there, dealing with the previous owner, they decided to give this car basically the prototype 004 combination. So what did that entail? This is actually a special shade of Spa Silver. Has a touch more blue in it, which is what pre-production 004 was. Pre-production 004 was catless with straight pipes off the turbochargers, which is what this car has now. Software adjusted to compensate for the lost back pressure and increased flow to help build more power. This car here makes just shy of 600 now. From there, one of the Achilles heels of the XJ220 was the cooling system. So this one is outfitted with a thicker rad, more cores, bigger fan system, and new electricals to run that. That way this car can run strong, fast, and dependable. And that's the combination we have here today. Basically, restored to a finer level through Don Law. And the workmanship is amazing. You can see it throughout everything. From the downpipes, from the turbochargers, the intake manifolds. You know, the XJ220 engine is already kind of pretty. It definitely has that 80s turbo boost engine look. You know, all these beautiful AN fittings and anodized lines and everything is just so race car. They did a phenomenal job. Having taken out the XJ220 on the road has been one hell of a experience. You know, I'm blessed to have driven basically everything under the sun. And when driving a car, you know, sometimes you're let down and sometimes you're super excited. And the XJ220 is one of those cars that gets you super excited every time. You can't wait to lay into that boost again. You can't wait to hear that gnarly V6 just idling away with its nasty turbocharger sounds just flowing through. It just really is an experience. Lay into the power and just feel it propel you. It just stands right up and goes. It's really, really an exceptional experience. But more importantly, look at it. The car is so long. It's designed to be so sleek. And although it doesn't really look like any other Jag you ever seen, it looks like a Jaguar. You know, these bottle cap wheels, that concave so deeply in to the center bolt, just a beautiful design. I love the little prototype sticker. XJ220 kind of reminds me of what McLaren does with their XP cars. I love that touch. I love the quarter glass over here in front. Beautiful into these swooping, this piano black intake over here, just feeding cooling air. These guys here go directly to the intercoolers. And then out back, when you look through the grille work, you just see that beautiful gearbox and you see the exhaust pipes come through in the tops of these Venturi tunnels. It's really, really gorgeous work. The car is exceptional in that regard. I gotta say, Don Law's done a great job with this car. Another little touch on this car that just gives you the effect of the Don Law is the fact that the louvers up front here, which are typically body colored, are painted gloss black on this particular example. So that's what kind of signifies our car from any other car you may see for sale or available online. It really is a work of art. The work he's done here, incredible. It is a true top class restoration. These guys are the best. And what's great is here, even locally in Toronto, Don Law has been more than helpful on supplying parts for us to service this car and make sure it stays top rate. So definitely something to also think about when deciding to make a purchase like this. I love how these light covers drop down to expose the headlights. Kind of a trick feature. Nobody ever really knows how they work. Love showing people how that works. You'll see that in the video. It really is an awesome piece. So anyway, this one here is available now. Great piece. Really excited to represent it. It comes with a slew of original documentation and service documentation from Don Law as well. It's original books, keys, everything has been kept with this car since new. So very cool. Lots of pedigree and provenance with this one, and we're super delighted to have it in inventory. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my little XJ220 spiel, and we look forward to the next episode.